All right, well, welcome to Design in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Johnson, and I've got some fun guests on the show today. I have got Doug Tangren, did I say that correctly?
You got it.
From Nauvoo Remembered.com, and of course, Sean Wilson that you've seen on the show before with wk-wilson.com.
Thank you.
I did it right.
Yeah.
That's a first. I always mess it up. But we'd like to welcome you to the show, and we got some interesting stories about some gentlemen here that have kind of the same mission that I have, I think. You know, we're here in our store, Temple in Mind, and each of them have their own e-commerce store that they're doing on their own. First of all, Sean, let's talk about WK Wilson again. Just give a little highlight. I'm sure we'll do like a cool little roll in between the break to show about the different product, or I could grab one real quick. Do you mind grabbing one real fast, or we could just show it?
No.
Right? Caleb's back there. He's kind of directing the show. He's like, no, we're good. He'll interject it into the show. But
we've been able to create some laser cut imagery of the different temples, and they're quite different than everything else that we've seen out there, and we're excited. We kind of put some try to help the symbolism that's in the temples to come out into the plaque.
Well, you do that in the background, and that's something I highlight every time
you have the building,
looks at it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, people will know what temple it is by that imagery, even if they don't recognize, because a lot of the temples, Monticello and is like the same as Oklahoma City and stuff. So, but the themes and the symbolism in there are different. So we try to pull those out. And
nice. Well, you were telling me about, like, I'm looking over this direction. A lot of people can't see what I'm looking at. I'm looking at
over
display.
Here, and everybody that's listening to us.
Provo Temple there. You had talked to me about the fact that you couldn't find some pictures of the interior. So is that what happened? Or
do you ever look into like research the temples and stuff?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's all kinds of symbolism. So there's themes. They try and tie it in. They tie it into the area. Like all Idaho temples have this wheat theme going through them.
Right. Same with Payson.
Yeah.
Payson has a very much. It's kind of like collecting the wheat, and it's interesting.
Right. Yeah. But that's part of the artistry.
Yeah, but we did research on the old Provo temple, and I couldn't find imagery of inside
or a
outside.
theme, right?
Well, the whole architecture is the pillar of fire,
right?
But my father-in-law lived around here, grew up around the temple. He says, no, you have to have rock canyon behind there.
Yeah, part of the challenge with that one is that it was built under a different philosophy from the church. Now they want to have this symbolism and they want to have this order. At that time, with the old Ogden and the new Provo, they just wanted cheap and fast and get it up, and so I mean, really? It's not a cheap temple. Don't misunderstand. But they were more concerned about
getting it up,
about the cost and functionality and getting it up than the artistry. I think now they've really shifted toward making sure there's motifs and things from the local
motifs. Good word. That throughout.
But so that's interesting. I like that. I didn't notice that at first, and looking at it now, I can see those symbols.
Yeah, all the background has trying to pull that theme from that temple into the actual plaque. So, and then you also have a bigger one. Are you selling that online, or is that a hush-hush? Should I be quiet about that?
We have, 12 by 18, and hopefully we'll have bigger ones.
12 by 18. He showed it to me the other day.
Nice.
It was big. It was beautiful.
Starts making an impact. That was fun. We brought that out for Swiss Days. And had a lot of good feedback.
Yeah, I love that you've put kind of the complexity and some of your ties into your pictures. That's really cool. Right. And I think that's what makes them really unique for you.
Thanks. That's the evolution was, hey, we started making wooden bow ties.
Yeah.
And now we make temple plaques.
Yeah.
Well, that makes total sense.
It's a good jump. No.
It is a good jump.
So, Nauvoo, I'm going to jump over here to Doug. Nauvoo Remembered. Tell us a little bit about what you do. And I've got one in my hand. We're going to highlight it, but I actually am a customer. This is not a gift from you. I ordered 2 cufflinks, I think 2 months ago or ish, and then I got my wife a nice ring from the stone from the Provo City Center. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
So we make jewelry using stones from different temples. So it's the actual building material that either came off the temple during a repair or is left over from the construction or renovation. And then we just cut those into beautiful little cabochons and we put them into jewelry settings so people can, have a little piece of their temple with them and enjoy and remember the temple.
Well, and that's the thing. Like,
remember.
Get that? Nauvoo Remembered. And it started with the original Nauvoo, which is the one my father did for many, many years before he passed. And we took the business and took it kind of a little beyond what he initially had thought. But
because that's what you were saying. You were saying that he had started that 30 years ago. You just celebrated.
Yeah. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary. I've been running it for 7 years, but he registered it with the state of Utah in 1991, back in June of 1991. But he was an auditor by he was not a jeweler by any stretch, but he loved Nauvoo and all things Nauvoo, and he went back there many times, and served a mission there. And on one of his trips, he was given a block of stone about this big that used to be a part of the original Nauvoo temple.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and you have to remember that the Nauvoo temple was destroyed, and back in the pioneer days, it's like, oh, there's a beautiful building.
Yeah, because the only piece I ever knew about was in the Smithsonian. It was the actual sunstone.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the only one I knew about.
Now, that's that's really cool. But half the town was made out of that. I mean,
that's a cool story.
There's about 3 or 4 different buildings on Main Street. This guy's porch, this guy's fence. Some of the stone ended up in Texas and Ireland. People were like, and I think there's a house in Utah where they built their cabin out of some of the scrap stone. So it's not rare. You can walk into Zion's Mercantile on Main Street today and buy a chunk in a nice little, like, they do like bookends, but they own the lot, empty lot across the street, and the church came to and they said, hey, can we dump the dirt from the foundation as they dug it up in your lot temporarily? And they're like, yeah, sure. And then they went out at night and pulled all the chunks of foundation. So they have a bunch of it. We have several pieces, but pretty common. So he had this stone, and a lot of people who have stone from a temple, they have grand ideas of what they want to do with it. Right. I could do something really cool. And we encourage that, but most of the time it ends up in a drawer or, tucked away in a box. And my father had this idea. He wanted to make a tie tack. It's the original tie tack we still sell today.
Yeah.
And he found a guy that could cut it in a little cabochon. So he made himself a tie tack, and then a lady saw it and she goes, can you make me a necklace? And he's like, well, I'm not a jeweler, but I'm sure I could figure that out. And with the help of a small little bead shop in Colorado, they helped him figure out how to do that, and he made her a necklace. And then she wanted earrings. So he just did those 3 settings in just Nauvoo stone for 23 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
But can I back up? So Nauvoo meant a lot to your dad.
Absolutely.
So his mission and the story of the temple itself.
We have ancestors that were, like a lot of people with ancestors who were there, but it just really embodies everything. I think it embodies kind of the spirit of the faith and the religion. I mean, these people got pushed around from place to place, and they found their own home, and they built this beautiful temple only to, they were dedicating and using it just a couple of months before they got pushed out into, pushed west. So he just loved that story, and of course the ancestral ties there, and
trying to keep something that was sacred and in remembrance, of course, with the name, right?
And he named it Nauvoo Remembered because he really wanted the jewelry to help people remember the sacrifice of the early saints.
Because the rededication of the Nauvoo temple was when?
2002, I think.
So 2002. So he had stone originally before they rededicated it.
Right. And that's
building jewelry before it was rededicated?
It's just the original. When we have stone from the new one, that's a totally different stone.
Right.
Because
you were telling me before we started that they actually didn't put any of the old stone back into the Nauvoo at all.
No, it requires a ton. They might have brought some historic pieces back. I don't know, but the stone itself, they just wanted to find something that looked similar to it because all the quarries are filled with water. And so they found.
Picturing your garage.
Pardon me?
I'm just picturing your garage full of. Anyway, keep going. I apologize.
I have a story for that I can tell you. But they found it. I want to say it was South or North Carolina. They found some that looked similar that was already cut and cured. They shipped it to Idaho, and they did all the cutting and then back to Nauvoo for assembly. So the current Nauvoo temple is not made with the same stone that the original was, but we have both and offer jewelry. Most people though, even the ones that were like married in the Nauvoo temple, or they're like, I want stone for my temple. They go with the original because I don't know. There's something cool about that.
That's a cool story. Well, we're gonna cut to a break real fast, but we're excited to have you guys on the show, and we'll pick this up here in a minute.
Today's sponsor is W.K. Wilson. From wooden plaques on your wall to bow ties that you can wear, W.K. Wilson creates amazing and unique designs that captivate the eyes of any who see them. These great creations are made by laser cutting many layers of wood and fitting them all together. The wooden plaques and bow ties make a special gift for friends, newlyweds, and loved ones. Visit their website today at wk-wilson.com.
All right, well, welcome back to the Zion in Mind podcast, and I'm your host, Aaron Johnson. I'm here with Sean Wilson and Doug Tangren, and both of these gentlemen here have a very similar theme to what I'm trying to do here at Temple in Mind at the University Place Mall. Sean, you brought up something over the commercial that I thought was kind of interesting. You were talking about genealogy. Do you want to lead into that?
It goes with Doug's story and his dad's story. It's just the temples, we focus on family. The remembered part, when he said Nauvoo Remembered, it kind of falls back into, remember remember family and remember,
well, that's the promise that comes from temple work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is our hearts being turned to the fathers and the fathers' hearts being turned to the sons, right?
Yeah. And that's really how I got involved with it, because my father loved it so much, and when he passed away, it was devastating. And I desperately was looking for something to keep him alive in me and to remember him.
And you've turned it into a career. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
That's really
great.
Amazing story.
So is that still a positive? I mean, like you just
Absolutely.
did Swiss days and hundreds of thousands of people were, and you had to do all this stuff, and you're still.
I get to talk about I get to talk about my dad every time we do a show. And people ask me, how'd you get started? I always point it back to my father, and because that's how it started. And then we make the jewelry right there on site. So we need staff. It's my family and some close friends and so I was just telling my wife coming back from Swiss days, it's like this is something that when our kids are older, they're going to, have memories. They're going to be like, remember working with Dad at this show? Or it'll be tied to Nauvoo Remembered, which is tied to my father. And I hope that they'll pass it on and they'll carry it on in their family, and it'll be part of our legacy.
Well, the thing that I've loved about Temple in Mind in general is because I started in the 3D printing realm, and then was able to start working with different artists. But I just started to understand this appreciation of the sacrifice it took to actually make a temple. That's something that we don't have to worry about today.
Oh, yeah.
We pay our tithing, and then we worry about the expertise to take care of the temple. But when you go back to actually crafting something, for me, it's been like taking that time and the effort and thinking about this is something that I hope will last forever, especially when we're now putting them in plastic, and different night lights. And the temple starts taking on a whole new theme for me, a whole new view of exactly what does it mean. And I think that's back to like Nauvoo Remembered, and especially what you're doing with your plaque, Sean, and trying to remind people of what the temple means and to go. I think that's why people had the motivation to work 40 years on a temple.
Yeah.
Because just what you said is they knew their children's children's children, and I would even dare say they probably even knew it would survive, hopefully the millennium, right, when we're talking specifically the Salt Lake Temple itself, which you do have that stone, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you can see that in the building of it now. You think when they announce a new temple, it's not like the saints are all going to gather around and start going to the local hills and quarrying stone. They bring in a company, and like the Salt Lake Temple is all
spoiled.
Yeah, the Salt Lake Temple, uses that quartz monzite or granite from the canyon there. That's what they had. St. George is made of the red sandstone because that's what they had. Manti is made of the oolite or limestone. That's what they had. Now, when they build a temple, it's like, let's get this marble from Rome and let's bring this from China because it's cheaper than heading up the hill and mining it there. There is a difference, not to detract from the current temples, but there's a lot of history in some of these early temples. It was sacrifice. They announced how many new temples just past conference, and it doesn't change. Doesn't change. Doesn't change my tithing. Doesn't change. How I live my life. It's just like, oh, that's great. Build that temple for us.
They're not asking us to put 10 hours in.
Yeah.
I mean, they are.
Yeah.
There's different things. We're really focusing on
nothing
to the level.
Nothing to the level of the sacrifice of the early temples.
I mean, our job now is to get the genealogy work and pull the names out and find the history, and that is the process of gathering Israel. in trying to get their temple work done. And that's very critical. And I'm thankful we don't have to do the construction because we wouldn't have time to pull all the names in.
Absolutely.
So there's a time and place for everything. But Sean, as you work on I know when I'm designing, so one of the things that I tried to do when I was designing different temples is I tried to at least learn something new about the temple, try to find things I did not know about the temple. For instance, in the Salt Lake Temple, the whole story about how in the holiness to the Lord was engraved. If you don't know that story, you need to find that story about the gentleman that lost his leg. I don't know if you've heard this story.
Oh,
and who got the honors of actually engraving that on the Salt Lake Temple and why. I mean, there's so many of these different stories, even today, like how New York actually got its temple lot and how, for instance, Franklin, which is actually the Nashville Temple, there's a story where they were struggling just to be able to get the baptismal font in the right location because of blasting and all these different things. And because of some legal issues that they had to deal with, they had to shove the temple forward, I think, 100 feet or so. And it just so happened to line up with an area that didn't need blasting to put the baptismal font in. Like, there's so many cool stories that come from the construction of temples. But tell me about your process when you're designing these temples. What do you do?
I that's not as fun as anyway. So we're in the Temple of Mind store that you've created, and we have, and I'm sure you get this as well, but because we get to talk about temples, people come in with their stories, their personal stories. This last weekend I met the people who own the property for the Leighton Temple, and it's generations and generations, and great grandparents used to live on one side, the grandparents live on the other side, and they will live there until they pass away, and then that house will go. Yeah, and the family gets to be a part of that. I met the people who are the property of the Ormond Temple because they came in here, and everybody has the temple story. So what we're doing is we're not telling people to remember the temple. We're giving them another thing that they can bring into their home, right? That has a special meaning to them that they can connect to the temple. I mean, we are not replacing the temples with our temples. We're reminding them.
Well, I'm a weird guy, and one of the fun things I do to motivate myself is I try to see the ripple effect of what's going on. And so I just did a little silly math equation where I figured, okay, if by the end of next Christmas, if I've pushed out 3,000 pieces of product that remind people of the temple, well, that's probably got a lifespan of like hopefully 15 years because they're not going to throw it away. And then I just did the exponential math of how many times would you come across seeing that particular art and reminding yourself. It was like in the millions of times of reminding people that, hey, we need to go to the temple. We need to focus on the temple. And I envision in my mind, when somebody's struggling, because this is what's happened to me. I was inactive in the church for 10 and a half years. But for some reason, unintentionally, in fact, the Payson Temple was the biggest one for me. Unintentionally, I would end up at the temple. I'd be there in the parking lot. I couldn't go in, but I just really felt like, I mean, I could go in, but I felt like myself wasn't ready to go in, but I always ended up at the temple for some reason. Well, now here I am, and realizing how big of a difference that made of just showing up to the temple. Payson Temple was really interesting. I remember having a really bad day, and I was like, I am not going to end up at a temple. And so I just started driving where I thought there was not a temple. And I was like, I'm going to go a complete opposite direction. I'm going to head south. I know about St. George. I'm not going to go that far. And sure enough, I end up in this neighborhood, and there is the construction starting point of the Payson Temple. And I'm like, oh. And it just really like made me realize how important temples are for our Heavenly Father, especially when children are suffering, especially when we are trying to figure out what to do next. I can't even begin to tell you how much temple has driven me back to the church and helped me to realize that my priority needs to be the temple.
We had my mother called me once, and she said, I was in sacrament meeting, and this lady got up and said that a friend of hers had given her this necklace that had stone from the Manti Temple in it, and how much it meant to her, and how it helps keep the temple close for her. And she goes, that's my son. And and I think we make a lot of jewelry, and we sometimes get into the business of we're making product, but boy, the impact that it has. We have people constantly come to us at our booth and say, I've had this for years. We had a lady that we met at Peach Days who said, I actually put it on her. She asked me to put it on her years ago. She goes, I haven't taken it off, and
Oh,
and
wow.
and she goes, it's who I love this. This is who I am, and we do have to remember that as we're making product that this is more than just product. It's more than just a beautiful,
there's a purpose.
A beautiful picture or a 3D model. It's actually something that has deep emotional connection for people.
Well, what sparked it for me was that, President Monson talked about how we need to have a picture in our home of every room of our home, but it actually was a quote reference back to Spencer W. Kimball, who talked about, and this is on our actual website, that talks about that we need to be able to have a picture of the temple in every room of our home so that when our children see that and then they come to the age of being able to make that decision to go, they've already made the decision because it's so comfortable. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to produce those pictures. And then there's another scripture in the Book of Mormon that talks about the blessing of the feet of those that publish peace and that publish good things that remind. That gave me permission to think about what could you publish more beautiful that talks about peace in Christ than the temple. Mm-hmm. And so there is that promise about how much comfort you will have in producing that actual content. Yeah. And we could talk about that right after this break.
Great.
All right, welcome back to the Zion in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Johnson. I'm here with Doug Tangren, and he is the owner of Nauvoo Remembered, and Sean Wilson with WK Wilson. I always want to say woodworking, but it is woodworking, and it's beautiful woodworking. But so we have stone, and we have wood, and plastic. There we go, because we 3D print our temples. But we were talking a little bit before the show. Something that's been really interesting. We're talking about like our experiences with customers and how beautiful that is, and how these pieces of product that are produced. There's this like really fine line about being exchangers in the temple, and I really had a struggle with developing and understanding that principle. And it was actually a stake president of mine because I had given him a temple nightlight, and I told him my intentions. And he goes, no, this isn't exchangers in the temple type stuff. Like, exchangers in the temples were people that were trying to sell things that were needed in order to do the services of the temple, and they were getting more beautiful and more gold and more elaborate. And so the poor people couldn't afford to actually do the work within the temples, because they couldn't afford to actually go do the work. Right. And that's where he got upset. And there's a huge difference. And people say things, just all the time, because we're in a mall, right?
Yeah.
Of like, oh, there's the Jesus store or whatever it might be. But when you get to the core of what we're trying to do, and that back to that Spencer W. Kimball quote about trying to put a temple in every room of the home, it's interesting to me that the story that just really I think is going to stick with me forever is how personal these temples are for each individual person. And the only way I could relate it to is on Christ's birthday, or the time that we celebrate Christ's birthday during Christmas, we get the presents. And I find that very interesting. I don't think that was a mistake at all. But what's interesting is as we put the house of the Lord on every single one of these temples, it says, this is the house of the Lord. But yet us as members say, that's my temple. That's mine. At Timpanogos Temple, that's where I got my endowment out. That's my temple. Or this is where I got married. That's my temple. In fact, it was so surprising to me how I thought, well, okay, I'm not going to have all the temples. So as long as I have like the key ones like Salt Lake, St. George, we may not have all the temples, but at least we'll have those, and at least they'll buy that to get us started. Nope. No, they'll come in and say, okay, where is the Taiwan temple or whatever, and you don't have it, and then they just like, thanks, but no thanks, and they'll walk out. And you're like, well, I have the Salt Lake temple. Do you guys experience kind of the same situation?
Absolutely.
I think it's a cool thing. I think it's a really neat thing, actually.
Some odd or some. You said you had some odd temples or some that were far away. So
we have temples from all over the world. We have Hong Kong, we have Taipei, we have some Asuncion. We have temples from all over the world, and we found that when we were first starting, we had like 15 or 16 temples. We went out and did our first show, and it was like, do you have this temple? And they're like, no, we don't. But we have this one. We had the exact same experience.
And they just like, no thanks.
That's not mine. That's not my temple.
No, that's not my temple.
I think it's a good thing. Because again, we talked about the difference between business and maybe not a good thing for business, right? Because you want to sell them something.
Sure.
But to me, it actually excites me because like how people really want their temple. They're really taking this ownership in what it is for them. I love that.
I mentioned to you that one of the first stones, actually the second stone after Nauvoo we had was from Aba, Nigeria. And a gentleman in our ward worked on that temple and brought my father some stone to make so he can make him some jewelry. We've had Aba, Nigeria in the store for years, and we never have anybody that wants it. But we were at a little obscure little show in in Rose Park. And a lady came up and she says, I bet you don't have my temple. And I said, yeah, all the time. And I said, which one is it? And she goes, Aba, Nigeria. And I was like, oh my goodness, we've been waiting for you for years. And we showed her the stone, and she just broke down crying. Yep. And she had just immigrated from Nigeria a couple of weeks ago, used to live right by the temple. She recognized the stone as well. And we made her a bunch of jewelry. But I never turn away from producing a temple because there's always someone that's going to be meaningful for it. And I want to be a part of that. I'll remember that experience for the rest of my life. Yeah. And but we've sold maybe a couple stints, but I don't care. Right. I don't care if we sell it. I want to have it for that one or two person that wants it.
Well, yeah, you almost become kind of a collector.
You do.
Right? In its nature and what you're doing, especially something that becomes like, could be an heirloom. Like I hope someday I have a little boy, because the Provo City Center is so special to my wife and I. To us, it represents rising from the ashes. And I know everyone has their story. But as soon as I saw that stone on the website, I knew exactly where that was.
That's great.
I know where all the memories and the nostalgic, is that the right word? The nostalgia of that just comes to you about like why our temple is so important to all of us. And that's why I really love this business, because normally in business, it's very cutthroat. It's very like, competitive and all these different things. But our demographic and our nature of our niche is so small. And that I've actually found the opposite with the people that you would think that are in competition. Like there's a lot of people that do 3D printing.
There are.
But I'm actually really excited for their success. I'm excited to see some of my ideas go into their stuff and vice versa. And it's not this situation of oh my gosh, I got to get there first and I got to be the best and the cheapest. It's a collaboration of effort. And I love that.
And because we're working with Temple and because we're really pulling from things that are very personal, emotional, I'm glad you brought up the the kind of what did you say, the sellers? Yeah,
the competition.
Because just selling stuff from the temple and making a profit from the temple.
Right, making a profit.
Because I was very concerned about that. Our stone is the actual stone from the temple, and we've had I can maybe a handful of people that are like, no, you shouldn't be doing this. Most people are 99.9% are like, this is fantastic. Thank you for doing this. Mm-hmm. But it's not about. So for me, it's not about selling a product. Yeah. I mean, this is how I make my living. But for me, it's about sharing those beautiful and personal things about the temple and giving someone another way to remember those things that are sacred and important.
That's the intent of it, because I'll be honest with you, when I've talked with the intellectual properties of the church, it's all been supportive.
Oh, absolutely.
It's been 100% supportive. As long as you're using original artwork and you're in good representation of the church, they love it. How could they not? I mean, this technically it's not even theirs, right? No. It's the Lord's. And I really believe that, I've seen people come up and go in different forms of art, and I really think it's the intention of the person.
We actually had the church reach out to us last February, and my father was always worried about the church coming and saying, please don't do this. Right. And that's the total opposite of what it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
We had the church history department reach out to us. They said, hey, we'd like to buy some of your stone. And I'm like, don't you guys have stone? And they're like, no, we love what you do. And we would love to have some, and I'm like, I will just give you whatever you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they were like, would you come down for an interview? And so we went down, and I went down and sat with them and they recorded an interview for about an hour telling our story and what have you. And I gave them some stone and some jewelry, and they put it in the cultural archives of the church, and they copied our website. But they are documenting how people express their faith. And this is how the church views this as. This is all positive because it's helping people to remember the sacred things, helping people to focus on the gospel. And I agree with you. They're totally supportive of it.
Well, I'll tell people that are listening and kind of on that fence of wondering, are they merchandising off of the church or whatever it might be? I'll tell you this much. This has probably by far been the hardest venture I've ever been a part of, because it's so emotionally attached.
Absolutely.
There's so much emotion and passion. Like if you're doing a business like a car wash or whatever it might be, like a lawn service even, there is this element of the customer being unhappy and you're like, well, whatever. I need to do more lawns. I need to make more money. I need to grow the business as big as I can. And of course, there's all those elements that we have to deal with ourselves just because we need to survive, right? But this is very personal. When I have a customer that comes in and is not happy about our services, I take it very personal because I'm like, whoa. The whole reason of what I'm trying to do is to not spoil this
to be positive
for you. And I desperately want to get it perfect. It's hard. It's really hard.
That's one of the overwhelming parts about what we do. We obviously sell a lot of jewelry as Christmas gifts and what have you. And so I always think about Christmas Day, literally thousands of people opening up a gift and going, this is something that I made, but going, oh my gosh, I love this. This is my favorite gift. This is my temple. Right. And that to me is almost almost overwhelming at times.
One of my favorite things is when they open up, because Sean puts them in these beautiful boxes, but when they come to the counter over here and they open up the temple that he had custom built for them, and they didn't kind of know what they were going to get. Like the biggest one was the Gilbert temple where you added the green to it, and she was so nervous because she had asked. She asked for the green and she wasn't sure if it was going to look good. And I didn't see it. I was so busy I didn't get a chance to open it.
I sent her a picture, but a picture's not the same
when
thing.
When we opened it together, instant tears, and the spirit was so strong. I was like, oh,
all
man,
the time,
this is beautiful.
And that's why we love to do live shows. I mean, I get to actually see that when they get it, and it's powerful, and it's. Yeah, boy, it just makes you want to keep going. It makes you want to find, for me, it makes me want to find more and more stone and have it available because I want those experiences. And man, what a rich life. Living such a rich life emotionally because of that connection to the temple.
And why we do what we do.
Yeah. And I think we kind of are all in a place where this is where we came to because it was something inside of us.
Yes. Yeah.
So I started doing wooden bow ties. Mm-hmm. How you get to temple plaques from wooden bow ties is not. It was always in the back of my head. It was always something I had tried, and actually had tried over the years many times. And then I finally got a Salt Lake temple plaque that I liked.
Yeah.
And that I could show other people because this was something very important to me that had just over and over. Like,
exactly.
The story of your dad. He wanted a piece of something that was very special to him, and you doing the 3D temples is like, no, I want to share that, and I can share it. This is a way I can share how special that is to me.
Well, oh my goodness, we could go on for a whole nother podcast.
We really could.
We could. All three of us are very passionate towards the temple, and more so about reminding people of what the temple can do in their lives because we've experienced it in our own lives. And so, man, I just want to keep going. Dang it. We're out of time, but I would like to thank both of you guys coming on the show. I wish you all the success you possibly can have within your ventures. I'm excited about Swiss Days. I wish we could have talked about that more, but so thanks for listening in. If there's any last little thoughts you guys want to add, this has been the Zion in Mind podcast, and thanks for listening, you guys.